through things like talk therapy, through certain medications, through people getting exercises and doing things. You know, I see a lot of depression in the work I do. When that gentleman had talked about information overload being a symptom of something bigger, you know, we look at addiction as an illness of escape. So our brains will change through various things. Is that enough? Okay.
Okay. That's you. Hi. I was wondering how many people here, and I'm going to say he's probably about the only age, who is aware that you've been recorded by more than one device tonight, and officially under the PANITA laws, the people who have been recording us, I know one and I know two, have to get everybody's permission to be able to ever share that with anybody else. Because we actually have, fortunately in Canada, some of the best regulations for personal privacy anywhere in the world. In fact, our laws force Facebook to change how they handle their laws. I'm an IT guy. I've been in the business for 30 years, and I've watched this industry change and go up and down. I can remember when internet porn it took you half an hour to print off a sheet of paper that long with a Playboy Playmate. Little X's, little dots, okay, somebody remembered that too. Probably thought that's what the computers were used at UT more than anything else for, printing out things. We were talking about the differences between generations about access to this technology. And I see a couple younger people here, well, a lot younger than me, but young enough that they spend most of their life using the technology on an ongoing basis. Being in the IT industry, one of the things I regularly hear about is that we as business people have to learn to change how and what we're doing as business to allow all these people who are using all this technology all the time to be able to use it all the time. And I regularly read that, for example, the best example is Google now allows their employees to spend up to 2 hours per day doing non-work related activities. Now I know that's based on the idea of the fact that most Google employees probably spend 16 hours a day in the shop, because most of us computer geeks, once we get into it, we really get into it, and hence 2 hours off is still meaning I'm getting a 12-hour day out of that employee. When he goes to get his first job, he's going to say, well, I'm used to being able to tick away all day long on my Facebook, do whatever it is that I happen to do online. And me, as the mean old, grumpy old guy that's 2 generations past him, is going to say, no, you can't. You're supposed to be doing a job. And so it's a very interesting dichotomy I'm reading all the time in my industry is, and I'm curious for people who are dealing, especially with people of that generation who are used to using this technology. When I hire somebody, I want them to do a job. They're supposed to give me roughly 7.5 hours a day worth of work, and I expect them to be spending the time doing that, not spending on Facebook, not gaming, no whatever. After hours, once they give me my 8 hours, couldn't care less. But I'm curious as what you guys are seeing is happening is the change of that generation. I think most of them are going to get a real eye-opening when they go to look for that first job and say, they get finding out, you just can't be doing whatever you've been doing all this time. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. It's interesting because there's no question that you need socialization both ways. But I would actually argue, we had this debate in the early 80s around telework. I would actually argue that bosses who think because people are sitting at their desks doing something or actually producing results are perhaps mistaken. And so I would say that what has to happen is we have to have performance-based work expectations, because what you will find with a lot of these 20-somethings is that they may be texting their friends while they're working, but they're going to be working while they're at home. So those conventional boundaries between work and home, I mean, I say, I live at work because I have no boundaries, and that's actually one of the real problems with the technology that erodes it. But those very same young people who may want to text their friends or update their Facebook site at 10 in the morning are probably going to be solving whatever your latest marketing problem is at 10 o'clock at night, because that's when they have the ideas. So that's one point. The second point is lots of organizations, especially those that have a service orientation, whether it's government or the private sector, are starting to recognize that the plug-in-ness, that's a new word, of younger people is actually hugely beneficial, because those social networks are key to innovation in all kinds of ways. So, there were organizations that had sort of the equivalent of the lids down approach I told you about in the classroom, where no Facebook access, no this, no that, only business use for cell phones and so on, that have come full circle because they recognize that having their employees really plugged in gives them access to all kinds of stuff that they would not get if they had a very strict kind of 9 to 5 structure. Depends on the business, but.
So, just to speak to the problem part, because I'm the addiction person, I'm the problem part. The online gamers I have seen are all in their early 20s. They flunked out of school. They work part-time at Old Navy, 3 hours a week. They live in their parents' basement, and their lives have really been overcome with digital technology, online games, role-playing games, the most common. And so there is that small percentage that have real problems with it. And one of the things that I find most frustrating is that their parents kick them in my door and say, "Oh, fix them." And parents have a huge role in that. And like I had said, that's why it's our responsibility to know what our kids are doing. And kids now, are 35 and living in their parents' basement. And when I deal with addiction, it's really a family disease, and it's really looking at how the whole family plays a role in that. And just to kind of speak to that age group, I just find one of the reasons I have a really hard time when it comes to family members is that when people change any type of behavior, okay, if you're looking at behavior change, your negative consequences really have to outweigh your positive consequences. And that's how people change any type of behavior, not in number, but sort of in significance. And so a lot of young people now are really just enabled by their parents, and so I have to talk to mothers about, if he's online and he's staying up all night, don't bring him his food. Why isn't he paying any rent? And they don't have the negative consequences that maybe somebody older would. They have to pay a mortgage, they have children they need to take care of, they have certain responsibilities. And the thing is that some people can get stuck. They get stuck in that sort of little generational place for a very, very long time. And I gotta tell you, I've got moms who bring in their 40-year-olds, and it's shocking, because then I work with them really as if they were a teenager, because they've never really matured past that stage. And so it's a whole family thing that's, I think, really important.
One of the things I'd like to play on, because it's come up in a couple of the questions, has to do with the idea that multitasking, that texting while you're watching television, while you're listening to music, is just the way that a particular generation works, and that we have to allow that. And I just question that based on some studies that have been done recently, which compare people who multitask between different types of media, people who don't multitask between various kinds of media. There's usually, as you can imagine, an age difference there. And then going through and giving them tests for each of the 3 different things that you could associate with multitasking. So ability to focus, ability to switch from one task to another, and memory. That is always the last one that I remember. It is I never remember that one. But those were the 3 things, and I gave them individual tests that each focused on attention span, ability to concentrate, memory, and ability to switch from one task to change the rules to another. And consistently, at least in the study that I was reading, the people who multitask on a regular basis do worse than people who don't. And it makes me question whether or not we should be allowing that kind of multitasking to occur, thinking that it's natural. Well, what is natural and what is actually effective, and just bring that as another kind of assumption that we've made that is leading us down a particular pathway that doesn't seem like we'll be able to come back from.
Well, I think I read the same study, because I read this whole piece around how multitasking actually doesn't exist, and that all we do is we put much less focus, concentration, and attention onto each task, and we just don't do it as well as if we were just to focus our attention on it. And just a piece about memory, and I wish I brought this, I couldn't find it again. I had read this really great study talking about how our brains are rewired with technology, and how people can't remember anymore. Their memory is very different, and if they look at the essence of learning, it's memory, right? Well, this is what the article had said. So the essence of learning is really memory and remembering things that you can apply later, and now we've become this generation of we have instantaneous information. And I was saying to somebody, like, I feel like a dinosaur. I'm only 33, but I went to the library and to the card catalog. When I went to university, I used microfiche. Like, I'm going to be telling my kids the same story. Like my dad, I walked to school with like leaves on my feet for 10 miles. I'm going to be that person, because my boss always said, technology moves so much faster than accountability. And I'm boggled really by things that I think are to come.
Just to add one more thing, I think you're right. Multitasking is a tricky one, and the way it translates to the classroom for us is having information, having access to information, maybe for later use, as a way to kind of get around the multitasking problem. And by that, what I mean is we have repeated calls as professors to make available everything: the PowerPoints, and the lecture notes, and the class activities, and summary of class discussions, because perhaps while you're in the classroom, you've been so busy multitasking that you didn't get all the information, but you want it for later use, perhaps. And we found problems with reading assignments. Many students don't do the readings. It came down to the point where we say, out of 4, just do 1 for me, just do 1. And even then, it's really hard to get them to do things that require attention. Not everybody, we are making those huge generalization, but it's true that multitasking may not be as good as it sounds, really.
I just had a quick thing to say about memory. I think memory is hugely important. I think it's hugely important to intellectual activity, and I actually think one of the problems is that we've developed a philosophy in our education system that suggests memorization is not important because memorization is boring. And I have a son who's in grade 1, and you're already seeing this, that there won't be any memorizing, and I kind of wonder when times tables come up whether we're going to be doing times tables. And I actually think those things are training for the brain, and they may not be fun, but they actually are useful. They're like working a muscle. So I think that's a social problem that actually probably doesn't have that much to do with digital technology. It has to do with the kind of trend in education.
Do you ever find shocking? Does anybody here actually know somebody's phone number?
I do.
Like, do you remember people's phone number?
I know my mother.
Yeah, right. I remember my Yeah, it's. I definitely agree on the memory that having some knowledge is actually important. But I'd also say that there's also a trade-off between memory and invention and critical skills, so that I see no evidence. In fact, quite the contrary. The generation of students I'm teaching now are bright as whips, clever, innovative, and interesting. So, I hate feeling like
I felt when I was a kid, when everyone was talking about the younger generation, and I think that we often have a tendency to forget what we were like when we were younger. So I think I'm not so